I want an open marriage. You're not enough for me anymore. Marcus shattered Judith's 3-year marriage with 7 words. 48 hours later, he was parading his mistress Evelyn at every elite event in the city, flaunting what Judith could never be: sophisticated, glamorous, worthy. Judith thought she'd lost everything until she locked eyes with Enzo Porro across a crowded charity gala. Italy's most powerful mafia boss. Marcus's deadliest rival. The one man her husband feared above all others. He made her an offer: marry him in 2 days and become untouchable. What began as cold revenge became the most dangerous love of her life. And Marcus? He was about to learn the cost of underestimating his wife. Welcome back, family. This story is absolutely wild. We're talking betrayal, revenge, mafia power, and a romance that will leave you breathless. Hit that like button, grab your snacks, and let's dive in, because this one's unforgettable. Judith knew her marriage was dying the moment Marcus said the word open. They were in their penthouse apartment, the expensive one overlooking Central Park that his investment firm paid for, the one with marble counters and floor-to-ceiling windows that should have meant they'd made it. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of him coming home later and later. 3 years of her trying to be enough, changing herself, shrinking herself, becoming smaller and quieter until she barely recognized the woman in the mirror. And now this. I need to be honest with you, Marcus said, not meeting her eyes as he loosened his tie. His Italian accent was barely there anymore after a decade in New York, smoothed away by ambition. I've been thinking about us, about our situation. Judith's stomach dropped. Nothing good ever started with "I need to be honest." What situation? She asked, even though she knew. The distance situation. The barely touching situation. The roommates who happened to be married situation.
Judith, I'm 35.
I'm building an empire. I need a wife who can keep up with that world. Marcus finally looked at her, and his expression was so cold it froze her blood. You're too boring for what I need. The word hit like a slap.
Boring.
I work in a library, Marcus. I've always worked in a library. You knew that when you married me. Her hands gripped the kitchen counter. You said you loved that I was different from your world. I thought I did. I was wrong. He poured himself scotch like they were discussing weather instead of destroying their marriage. I think we need to try something different. Different how? I want an open marriage. The words hung in the air like a grenade about to explode. Judith stared at him. What? We stay together, but we see other people. I need someone who fits my lifestyle, someone who can attend galas and charity events, someone sophisticated. But I don't want to lose you. You're stable, reliable. This way, we both get what we need. The grenade exploded. You want to cheat with my permission? Judith's voice came out strangled. That's not a marriage, Marcus. It's how our marriage works now, he interrupted, unless you want a divorce. The threat was clear. Agree or lose everything. Judith thought about her life. She'd quit her PhD program to support Marcus's career. She'd isolated herself from friends and family to be available whenever he needed her. She'd spent 3 years making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient. Boring. And now he was asking her to watch him replace her publicly. I need time to think, she whispered. Take the night. Marcus set down his glass like the conversation was over. But Judith, I'm doing this either way. The only question is whether you're staying or going. He walked out, leaving her standing in their pristine kitchen with a dying marriage and a breaking heart. Judith didn't sleep that night. She lay in their bed alone. Marcus had moved to the guest room months ago and tried to understand how the man who'd pursued her so relentlessly had become someone who saw her as an inconvenience. She'd met Marcus 4 years ago when he came to the library researching old Italian families for a client. He'd been charming, persistent, overwhelming. He'd said her intelligence captivated him, that her quiet strength amazed him, that he'd never met anyone like her. She'd believed him. They'd married quickly. He'd promised her the world. And somewhere along the way, The man who'd loved her became the man who called her boring. By morning, Judith had made her decision. She'd agreed to the open marriage because she was terrified of being divorced and alone with no career and no support system. Because she still loved him, even though he clearly didn't love her anymore. Because maybe if she agreed, he'd see how much she was willing to sacrifice and remember why he'd married her. She was wrong. That evening, Marcus came home early with his secretary. Evelyn walked into Judith's apartment like she owned it. Tall, blonde, elegant in a designer dress that probably cost more than Judith's monthly salary. Everything Judith wasn't. "Judith, this is Evelyn," Marcus said casually, like he was introducing a colleague instead of his mistress. "She'll be joining us for dinner." Judith felt the room tilt. "Joining us? I'm being transparent about my intentions. Isn't that what you wanted?" Honesty. His smile was cruel. "Evelyn and I have been seeing each other for 8 months. This arrangement just makes things easier." 8 months. He'd been cheating for 8 months. The open marriage wasn't about honesty. It was about making his affair legitimate, making Judith complicit in her own humiliation. Evelyn smiled, sweet and poisonous. "I hope this won't be awkward, Judith. Marcus speaks so highly of you." The lie was so blatant it was almost funny. Judith looked at Marcus, waiting for him to see how cruel this was, waiting for even a shred of the man she'd married. Nothing. He just looked impatient. That night, Judith sat at dinner with her husband and his mistress, watching them laugh and touch while she became invisible in her own home. And something inside her finally broke. Not her spirit, her fear. By dessert, she'd made a new decision. She wasn't going to shrink anymore. She wasn't going to disappear. She was going to make Marcus regret every single word. 2 nights later, Judith stood on the balcony of the Plaza Hotel, gripping champagne she couldn't taste while her world collapsed inside. Marcus's family charity gala. The one her mother-in-law had barely allowed her to help plan. The one where Marcus had just walked the red carpet with Evelyn on his arm, introducing her to investors and old friends like she was already his wife. The humiliation was exquisite. Calculated. 300 elite guests had watched Judith arrive alone, then watched Marcus parade his replacement. Rough evening. The voice came from behind her, deep and accented. Italian, but different from Marcus's polished American tones. This was Rome, old money, dangerous. Judith turned and her breath caught. The man was devastating. Late 30s, maybe 40, in a tuxedo so perfectly tailored it looked weaponized. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from Renaissance marble. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that suggested violence, and eyes that saw everything. He moved like a predator, controlled and purposeful. She'd seen him inside, standing apart from the crowd. People gave him space instinctively, the way prey recognizes a hunter. "Understatement of the year," Judith said, her voice bitter. "But thanks for noticing. I've been watching you." He moved closer, and Judith caught his scent, expensive cologne, and something darker.
Danger.
"All evening. Your husband is a fool." "You know Marcus?" "Enzo Porro." He extended his hand. "We're business rivals. He's been trying to undercut my developments for years." Judith's stomach dropped. She knew that name. Everyone did. Enzo Porro controlled half of New York's luxury real estate and all of its shadows. Mafia royalty, though no one said it out loud. She should walk away. Instead, she took his hand. His grip was warm, strong, and he held on longer than necessary.
"Judith," she said.
"I know who you are." Enzo's thumb brushed against her knuckles, and he'd shot up her arm. "The wife he's replacing. I watched him parade that woman past you like you were invisible. Cruel, even by Marcus's standards." "Why do you care?" "Because I have a proposition for you." Enzo released her hand and leaned against the balcony railing, completely at ease. "One that benefits us both." "I'm not interested in." "Marry me." Judith blinked.
"What?"
"In 48 hours. I need a wife for a major international deal." Old Italian families, very traditional. They want to see stability, heritage, a proper family man. His smile was sharp. Marcus moving his mistress into your home just gave me the perfect opportunity. You're insane.
I'm practical.
Enzo moved closer, and suddenly the space between them felt electric. 1 year, purely business. You get protection, financial security, and front-row seats to Marcus's destruction. I get the deal closed and the satisfaction of stealing something he values. He doesn't value me. He made that clear. Then make him realize what he lost. Enzo's eyes were intense, pinning her in place. You show up to events on my arm, living in my penthouse, wearing couture, untouchable. We make sure Marcus sees exactly what he threw away. And when the year ends, you walk away with your dignity and enough money to build whatever life you want. Judith's heart pounded. Why would you do this? You don't know me. I know Marcus has been embezzling from investors to fund his lifestyle. I know he's one major scandal away from collapse. And I know, Enzo's gaze traveled over her face slowly, that you deserve far better than being humiliated in public by a man who isn't worthy of tying your shoes. This is insane. Maybe. He extended his hand again. But you came out to this balcony, wanting to hurt the way he hurt you. I'm offering you the tools to do it effectively. Marry me, Judith. Let me show you what power feels like. Watch Marcus realize he's the biggest fool in New York. Judith looked at his hand. Scarred knuckles. Long, dangerous fingers. She thought about Marcus and Evelyn inside, about 3 years of feeling worthless, about the humiliation still burning through her chest. And she thought about the way Enzo looked at her, like she was something valuable instead of something disposable. What would I have to do? Show up. Let me treat you the way you should have been treated all along. His smile was devastating. And watch your husband's world burn. Judith placed her hand in his.
Deal.
Enzo's fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and something passed between them that felt like a promise or a threat or both. One more thing, Enzo said, not releasing her hand. I saw you before tonight. Last year, at the Morgan Library benefit. You were wearing a blue dress, standing by the rare manuscripts, looking like you'd rather be anywhere else. Your husband ignored you the entire evening. I wanted to talk to you then, tell you that you deserved better. But you were married, and I don't cross that line. Judith's breath caught. You remember what I was wearing? I remember everything about that night. The way you touched the glass cases like the books were treasures. The way your husband checked his phone while you tried to share something you discovered. The way you smiled when people talked to you, even though your eyes were sad. Enzo's thumb brushed across her knuckles. I've wanted to talk to you for a year. Your husband just gave me an excuse to stop being honorable about it. This is still just business, Judith said, but her voice sounded uncertain even to her own ears. We'll see. Enzo released her hand finally, and Judith felt the loss like a physical thing. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., my lawyer's office. I'll send you the address. Bring nothing but yourself. I'll handle everything else. Enzo. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. He stepped back, and his smile was dangerous and beautiful. Because that's what you are, whether you believe it yet or not. Then he was gone, moving through the ballroom with that predator's grace, and Judith stood on the balcony with her heart racing and her skin still warm where he'd touched her. She'd just agreed to marry a Mafia boss in 48 hours. And for the first time in 3 years, she was smiling. The next morning, a car arrived at Judith's apartment. Not Marcus's apartment anymore, just hers temporarily. At exactly 9 a.m. black Mercedes, tinted windows, a driver who opened the door without speaking. Inside, Enzo sat reviewing documents on his phone, looking like he'd already conquered half the city before breakfast. Good morning, he said, his eyes traveling over her jeans and sweater. Ready to become untouchable? The penthouse was in Tribeca, all floor-to-ceiling windows and marble and space that felt like breathing after years of suffocation. Judith walked through rooms that looked like art installations, touching surfaces that were probably worth more than her entire education. "This is where I'll live," she whispered. "This is where you'll rule," Enzo corrected, and something in his voice made her spine straighten. The team arrived within the hour. Stylists with garment bags, a hair person whose portfolio included actual celebrities, a makeup artist who studied Judith's face like she was painting a masterpiece. They worked for 3 hours, transforming her from invisible wife to something devastating. When they finished, Judith didn't recognize herself. The dress was deep emerald, designer, hugging curves she'd forgotten she had. Her hair fell in waves that looked effortless but weren't. Her makeup made her eyes huge, dangerous, her lips the kind that made men stupid. "You look like a queen," Enzo said from the doorway, and his voice had gone rough. Not the controlled businessman anymore. Something raw. "I look expensive. You look like yourself." Finally. He moved closer. "The contract is ready. My lawyer's in the dining room." The marriage contract was 30 pages of protection. Enzo's lawyer explained every clause. 1-year term, generous monthly allowance, penthouse provided, no physical relationship required, ironclad NDA, and at the end, a settlement that would make her independently wealthy. "You're sure about this?" the lawyer asked, clearly unconvinced this arrangement was legal. Judith signed her name in bold strokes. Completely. That evening, Enzo took her to Per Se, the kind of restaurant where reservations took months and paparazzi lurked outside like predators. He'd called them, Judith realized. Made sure they'd be seen. His hand settled on her lower back as they walked past cameras, warm and possessive, and flashes exploded. Photographers shouted questions, but Enzo ignored them, his attention focused entirely on Judith like she was the only person who mattered. Inside, over wine that probably cost more than her monthly salary used to be, Judith's phone rang. Marcus. Then again.
And again.
"Answer it," Enzo said. "Let him hear your voice."
She did.
"What? What the hell are you doing?" Marcus's voice was panic and fury. "You're all over page 6 with Enzo Porro. Are you insane? Do you know what you're doing to my reputation?" "Enjoying dinner," Judith said calmly. "Is there something you needed?" "Needed? Judith, you're married to me. In an open marriage. Your rules, remember?" She watched Enzo's slight smile. "I'm just living my life. Like you suggested. This is different. This is. He's using you to destroy my business. Then I guess you shouldn't have made me available." She hung up, blocked his number, and felt power flood through her veins for the first time in 3 years. Across the table, Enzo raised his wine glass. "To new beginnings." "To revenge," Judith corrected. His smile was devastating. "Even better." Exactly 48 hours after the balcony proposal, Judith became Mrs. Enzo Porro in a villa outside the city that looked like it had been stolen from Tuscany and dropped into upstate New York. The ceremony was small, 30 people, all Enzo's world. Family members who looked like they'd stepped out of Godfather films, business associates in $1,000 suits, women dripping in diamonds who studied Judith with calculating eyes. A string quartet played Puccini. White roses everywhere, the kind that costs more per stem than most people's hourly wage. Judith wore ivory silk that moved like water, custom-made in 36 hours by a designer who owed Enzo favors. She looked like old money, like power, like someone who'd always belonged in this world. Enzo waited at the altar in a tuxedo that made him look even more dangerous than usual, his eyes locked on her as she walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away. She was giving herself. "Until death do us part," the officiant said, and the words felt heavier than they should for a business arrangement. "I do," Enzo said, sliding a platinum band onto her finger. Not the modest gold Marcus had given her. This ring made statements. "I do," Judith echoed, and meant it more than she'd meant anything in her life. They'd barely finished signing the papers when security rushed in, phones pressed to their ears. "Sir, Marcus Anderson is at the gate. Demanding entry. Says he needs to stop the wedding." Enzo's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Remove him. If he returns, call the police. Judith should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she felt nothing. Marcus was already irrelevant. The reception was champagne and danger, Enzo's hand never leaving her waist as he introduced her to his world. My wife, Judith. Simple, possessive, absolute. People congratulated them with knowing eyes, understanding this was business, but not quite believing it. That night, back at the penthouse, tension crackled between them. Your room is the master suite, Enzo said, standing in the hallway like he was afraid to come closer. Mine is down the hall. Separate, as agreed. As agreed, Judith repeated, but neither of them moved. This was supposed to be simple, Enzo said quietly. A transaction. It still is. Then, why does it feel like I just married someone I can't stop thinking about? His hand came up, almost touching her face, then dropped. Good night, Mrs. Porro. He walked away, and Judith stood alone in the hallway of her new life, her ring catching the light, her heart pounding against her ribs. The next morning, they attended a real estate development conference together. Judith in a power suit that cost more than her previous car, Enzo's hand possessive on her back as they navigated the ballroom. Every head turned. Whispers followed them like smoke. That's Enzo Porro's new wife. Marcus Anderson's ex. Can you believe it? She's untouchable now. Marcus was there, pale and furious, Evelyn clutching his arm like a lifeline. Their eyes met across the room, Judith powerful and protected, Marcus watching his replacement realize exactly what he'd lost. Enzo leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. Ismael, gotta show him what winning looks like. Judith smiled, and it was genuine. 3 weeks into the marriage, Judith sat in on her first real business meeting. Enzo had hesitated before inviting her, but she'd insisted. I'm your wife. I should understand your world. The conference room was all dark wood and darker men, discussing a development deal in Brooklyn that seemed legitimate until Judith paid attention to what wasn't being said. The pauses. The careful phrasing. The way everyone deferred to Enzo with a particular kind of respect that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with fear. The zoning approval, one associate said carefully, has been expedited. And the previous owner's objections? Enzo asked. No longer an issue. Judith understood. Some problems got solved in boardrooms. Others got solved in ways that didn't leave paper trails. She should have been terrified. Instead, she leaned forward. What about the community board? They've been vocal about displacement. If we address their concerns publicly, affordable housing units, community center, we control the narrative before opposition builds. The room went silent. Then Enzo smiled, slow and dangerous. My wife makes an excellent point. Draft a proposal. After that, he consulted her on everything. She had an instinct for reading people, for seeing angles he missed. Her years of library research made her devastating with due diligence. She wasn't just playing the part anymore. She was becoming essential. Marcus's world was crumbling in direct proportion to Judith's rise. His investors started pulling out, citing concerns about leadership stability. His mother called Judith 17 times, leaving increasingly unhinged voicemails about family honor and proper behavior. Evelyn appeared in paparazzi photos looking stressed, the glamorous confidence gone. He's desperate, Enzo said one evening, reviewing intelligence reports his people had compiled. Making risky moves, trying to salvage deals. He'll make a mistake soon. They were in his home office, working late, and Judith had stopped noticing when work became an excuse to be near each other. The way his hand lingered when passing her documents. The way she found reasons to lean close, breathing his cologne. This was supposed to be business, Judith said quietly. It still is. But Enzo's eyes said otherwise. The kiss happened after dinner meeting went wrong. A rival developer, someone who didn't respect Enzo's boundaries, had cornered Judith in the restaurant hallway. His hand on her arm, his breath wine sour, his implications clear. Enzo had appeared like violence contained in a suit, his hand closing around the man's wrist with enough pressure to make bones creak. Touch my wife again, and they'll find pieces of you in 3 different burrows. The man fled. Enzo turned to Judith, his control fracturing. Did he hurt you? No, you stopped him. Her heart was racing, but not from fear. From the way Enzo looked at her. Possessive, protective, barely restrained. I can't keep doing this, Enzo said roughly. Pretending I don't want you. Pretending this is just business, when I think about you constantly. When seeing another man touch you makes me want to commit violence. The contract. Forget the contract. He moved closer, backing her against the wall. Tell me you don't feel this. Tell me I'm alone in this, and I'll walk away. I'll honor our agreement. But if you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling... Judith grabbed his lapels and pulled him down. The kiss was desperate, hungry, nothing polite or careful about it. 3 weeks of tension exploding. His hands in her hair, her back against the wall, both of them breathing hard when they finally broke apart. This complicates everything, Judith whispered. I don't care. Enzo's forehead pressed against hers. I stopped caring the moment you signed that contract. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by Enzo's head of security, with an expression that said the contents were explosive. Judith was having coffee in the penthouse, still wearing Enzo's shirt from the night before. They'd stopped pretending about separate bedrooms 3 days after that first kiss. He took the envelope, scanned the first page, and his entire body went rigid. What is it? Judith asked. Enzo's jaw clenched. You need to sit down. I'm fine standing.
Judith. Seat.
She sat. He spread financial documents across the marble counter, page after page of bank statements, wire transfers, legal filings. Her family trust. The inheritance from her grandmother that had made her financially independent when they'd married. $50 million that was supposed to be untouchable. Marcus has been embezzling from your trust for 18 months, Enzo said, his voice carefully controlled. Systematic withdrawals disguised as investment transfers. He's drained $42 million so far. The room tilted. That's not possible. I would have noticed. The statements were forged. He had access to your accounts because you added him as co-trustee after the wedding. He's been generating fake statements, fake investment reports, all of it. The money's been flowing into offshore accounts. Enzo's finger traced a line through the documents. Accounts he shares with Evelyn. Judith's hands started shaking. Evelyn knew? Evelyn orchestrated half of it. She's not just a mistress. She's a financial analyst he hired specifically for this. They've been planning this since before your first anniversary. The betrayal hid in waves. The open marriage was designed to push you toward divorce. Once you filed, he'd have 6 months to hide the remaining assets before discovery. The prenup you signed gives him 50% of marital assets in a divorce, including your trust if you agreed to commingling funds. Which you did, because he convinced you it was romantic. Enzo's voice was pure ice. He was never going to let you keep the money, Judith. Every moment of your marriage was manipulation toward this end. Grief crashed through her first 3 years of lies, of manufactured inadequacy, of believing she was the problem when she was just the mark. Then the grief transformed into something volcanic. He called me boring, Judith whispered, her voice shaking with rage. Made me feel worthless. Isolated me from everyone I knew. All so I'd be too broken to notice him stealing everything my grandmother left me. Judith. She stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. Evelyn wasn't some affair. She was his partner in robbing me blind. The humiliation at the gala, moving her into my home, that was all theater to push me toward divorce, so he could finish the theft. Yes. Enzo moved toward her carefully, like approaching something dangerous.
I'm sorry.
I know this is. I'm going to destroy him. Judith turned, and Enzo actually stepped back at what he saw in her eyes. Not just his reputation or his business. I want him to lose everything the way he tried to make me lose everything. I want him in prison. I want Evelyn in prison. I want them to understand what it feels like to be completely powerless. Then we make it happen. Enzo's hands framed her face. My lawyers are already building the case. We have evidence of wire fraud, forgery, embezzlement. Criminal charges, not just civil. They'll both face federal prosecution. When? We need to be strategic. One move, perfectly executed, so they can't run or hide assets. His thumb brushed her cheek. I need you to trust me.
Can you do that?
Judith looked at the man who'd married her for business and stayed for something else entirely. Tell me the plan. Enzo smiled, and it was absolutely merciless. We're going to make Marcus wish he'd never heard your name. The Manhattan Business Summit was the kind of event where empires were built and destroyed, where New York's elite gathered to see and be seen. Marcus was scheduled to present his latest development project, desperate to salvage investor confidence after months of bleeding capital. He didn't know Enzo had bought a keynote slot immediately before his presentation. Judith sat in the front row wearing crimson, the color of revenge and victory, as Enzo took the stage. Marcus was backstage, probably reviewing his notes, probably thinking he still had a chance. Good morning, Enzo said, his voice carrying through the ballroom. I'm here to discuss the cost of fraud in our industry. The lights dimmed. On the massive screens behind him, financial documents appeared. Bank statements.
Wire transfers.
Forged investment reports. All of it meticulously annotated, damning, irrefutable. For 18 months, Marcus Anderson systematically embezzled $50 million from his wife's family trust. Enzo's voice was clinical, devastating. Using forged documents and offshore accounts shared with his accomplice, Evelyn, he drained assets while manufacturing false statements to hide the theft. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, the sound of phones being pulled out to photograph the evidence. Marcus burst from backstage, his face white. This is a lie. This is. Federal agents are waiting in the lobby, Enzo continued calmly. Warrants were issued this morning for both Mr. Anderson and Ms. Chun on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The evidence has been provided to the FBI, the SEC, and the Manhattan District Attorney. Investors were already standing, already leaving. Business partners pressed themselves against walls like they were contaminated by proximity. Marcus's world collapsed in real time, projected on screens for everyone to witness. Judith rose and walked toward the lobby, knowing Marcus would follow. The photographers were already gathering. Enzo had made sure of it. Marcus caught her arm in the hotel lobby, desperate and wild-eyed. Judith, please. This is a mistake. We can fix this. She turned slowly, and her expression made him release her. Fix this? The way you fixed our marriage? The way you fixed my trust fund? I didn't. I can explain. You called me boring while you stole everything from me. Her voice was ice and fury. You manipulated me, isolated me, made me believe I was worthless. All so you could rob me blind and blame me for not being enough. Photographers' cameras clicked like insects. Judith, I'm begging you. You should have thought about that before you moved your accomplice into my home. Before you humiliated me at every opportunity. Before you decided my inheritance was yours to steal. She stepped closer, and Marcus actually backed away. Now you have nothing. No money, no business, no freedom. Exactly what you tried to leave me with. Federal agents moved through the lobby, badges out. Marcus Anderson, you're under arrest. Marcus's legs buckled. As they handcuffed him, he looked at Judith one last time. I loved you. No. Judith said coldly. You love my money. There's a difference. They led him away while cameras captured everything. Evelyn's arrest warrant was executed an hour later, but she was already gone. Private jet to Brazil, abandoning Marcus to face federal charges alone. Her betrayal was absolute, and somehow that felt like justice too. Enzo found Judith on the hotel balcony, watching the city glitter below. How do you feel? Free, she said simply. For the first time in years, completely free. He pulled her close, and she let herself lean into his strength. What happens now?
Now.
Judith smiled. Now we build something real. The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks later, expedited through the courts because fraud invalidated the original marriage. Marcus signed from federal detention, his lawyer probably advising him that cooperation might reduce his sentence. It wouldn't. Judith sat in Enzo's study, staring at the document that made her legally single again.
Free.
Her trust fund had been recovered. All $50 million, plus penalties Marcus would be paying for the rest of his life. She was independently wealthy, protected, untouchable. The contract is over, Enzo said quietly from the doorway. He'd given her space to process, but his tension was visible. 1 year was the agreement. You fulfilled your end.
Ever fulfilled minna.
Judith looked up at him. So that's it? We're done. If that's what you want. His voice was carefully neutral, but his hands were clenched. I won't hold you to an arrangement that started as revenge. You have your money back. Your freedom. You don't need me anymore. What if I want you anyway? Enzo went very still. Judith. I don't want it to be over. She stood, crossing to him. This started as business, as revenge, as a transaction. But somewhere between the contract and now, it became real. You became real. This life we're building, I don't want to walk away from it. You're sure? His hands came up, framing her face like she was something precious. Because if we do this, it's not for show. It's not for revenge. It's because I'm completely in love with you, and I want forever, not just a year. I'm in love with you too. The words felt like freedom. I want real. I want forever. I want to build something true with you. Then marry me again. Enzo smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Not for business. Not for revenge. For love. They renewed their vows in a small chapel upstate, just them and a priest who asked no questions about why a couple married 3 months ago needed to do it again. This time, there were no business associates, no family politics, no contracts or lawyers or ulterior motives. Just Judith in a simple white dress and Enzo in a dark suit, promising forever. I promise to see you, Judith said, tears streaming down her face. Not as a business arrangement or a convenience, but as my partner, my equal, the man I choose every single day. You showed me I was strong when I'd forgotten. You gave me back my power. I love you, and I'm choosing you freely. I promise to protect you, Enzo said, his voice rough. Not because you need protection, but because you deserve someone who stands beside you. You're the most powerful person I know, and I'm honored you chose me. I love you, Judith. Not the contract. Not the arrangement. You. They kissed as husband and wife for the second time, and this time it meant everything. That night, they made love without contracts or obligations hanging over them. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of betrayal and built something real from the ashes. This is what love is supposed to feel like, Judith whispered against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. This is just the beginning, Enzo promised, his arms tightening around her. We have forever. And for the first time in her life, Judith believed in forever. Not the false promises Marcus had made, but the real thing, built on truth, partnership, and a love that had survived being tested by fire. They'd started as strangers making a deal. They'd become something unbreakable. 5 years later, Judith stood on the terrace of their villa in Lake Como, watching her children chase each other through gardens that looked like they'd been painted by Renaissance masters. Marco and Isabella, 4 years old, dark-haired and beautiful, arguing in a mixture of English and Italian that made Enzo laugh every time. They had his eyes and her stubborn determination, and they ruled their small kingdom with the confidence of children who'd never known anything but love.
Mama.
Isabella called. Marco took my doll. Marco, Judith called back, her voice carrying the authority that now made grown men in $1,000 suits defer to her judgment. Return your sister's property. He did, immediately. Even at 4, he understood his mother wasn't someone you crossed. Enzo emerged from the house with his tablet, his expression carefully neutral. You should see this. On the screen, a news alert. Marcus Anderson sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. No early release. His business empire had been dissolved, his assets seized, his reputation destroyed so thoroughly that his name was now synonymous with fraud in business schools. And Evelyn? Judith asked, feeling nothing but distant curiosity. Still in Sao Paulo, wanted by Interpol. Brazil won't extradite, but she can never leave. She's essentially imprisoned by her own cowardice. Enzo set down the tablet. How do you feel? Judith looked at her children playing, at the life she'd built, at the man who'd helped her find her power again. Grateful, actually. If Marcus hadn't betrayed me, I never would have found you. I never would have discovered who I really am. You're terrifying, Enzo said, pulling her close. In the best possible way. She'd become essential to his empire, not as decoration but as partner. She negotiated deals, managed investments, commanded respect from men who'd initially dismissed her. She was queen in every sense that mattered. Powerful, feared, admired.
Mama.
Marco ran up, breathless. Tell us a story. What kind of story? About how you and Papa met. Judith looked at Enzo, and they shared a smile. Their children knew the sanitized version, that Mama had been sad, and Papa had made her happy. Someday they'd learn the full story. Not today. Once upon a time, Judith began, settling onto the terrace with both children in her lap, there was a woman who forgot she was powerful. And then she met a man who reminded her. And they lived happily ever after? Isabella asked. They did, Enzo said, his hand on Judith's shoulder. Because your mother is the most powerful woman I know, and I'm smart enough to stand beside her instead of in her way. That evening, after the children were asleep, Judith and Enzo sat on the terrace drinking wine, watching the sun set over the lake. Sometimes your worst moment leads to your best life, Judith said quietly. Marcus destroyed me. And in doing that, he set me free to become who I was always meant to be. He gave you to me, Enzo said. I should probably send him a thank you note. Judith laughed, the sound carrying across the gardens where her children slept, secure and loved in ways she'd never been until she'd found this man, this life, this power that was finally, completely hers. Sometimes the person who destroys you actually sets you free. Marcus tried to take everything from Judith, her confidence, her money, her life. Instead, he pushed her straight into the arms of the most powerful man in New York. 2 days. That's all it took to change her entire world. Would you marry a mafia boss for revenge? Could you trust dangerous love? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.